I could sit here and say right now, I got a calling to do self-portraits every day for the rest of my life until I die. But that's not necessarily being honest, because there's some thought involved with that, and it didn't take like a supernatural being or some magical thing to happen. It was just a decision I made, a logical, like a rational decision I made, and then all this other stuff, everything else, just all is bloomed out of that. Probably there might be some desperation in there where you feel desperate, like you're alone or something. Maybe for me personally, like I'm alone in the world or something, like maybe I thought no one understood me, or, you know, whatever types of negative. Part of me with the self-portraits wants to get as much experience out of life as possible. So by the time that I die, I will have really lived a full life. So, but because I really don't like it when the people say that, like I was chosen, or painting's my calling. I can't imagine a life without it, or something like that, because it tries to make it a mysterious type of thing. And so, like someone with some depression, or like low self-esteem and beats himself up, or someone that's a little bit psychotic, or, you know, or maybe a whole bunch of psychotic in them, you know, it just creates all this baggage that they don't need when they just want to, you know, they just need a little bit of encouragement and self-worth. And sometimes I'm easily excitable, and so I can like get really outrageous, get on the bullhorn and yell at people on the streets and just act up and stuff. And then I don't get depressed too much. More of like some mania, but not really too bad where it can't be kept in check. And so ever since I got in that knife fight and went to prison, I always knew, don't carry a knife. If you don't have a knife in your pocket, you can never use it. So you can never stab someone ever if you don't have a knife. And I never stabbed anyone after that. But then I did cut Randall Easton. I was so much of a troublemaker then, and doing so many terrible things, that I didn't really get to stay with it. I always liked art and stuff, but it wasn't until I went to East Tennessee State University that I really saw that I could use it to help me psychologically and emotionally and socially. I don't have a lot of joy. Doing the self-portraits, I get some joy from, because I know that no matter whatever happens to me, unless I'm in a coma or have a severe stroke or a frontal lobe damage, there's like no way that I think even if I had frontal lobe damage, I would still be able to draw my self-portrait every day. Like, I think by now I would not forget I think it's so much a part of my daily life. Like eating or something, I might forget to eat. I might forget to bathe or something like this just because I'm wrapped all up in art. When it comes to the dark side in the arts and the tortured soul and the tortured artist, like teachers, educators, and people will like to say that that's a myth and that you don't really need that. But there is some kind of connection there. I'm not going to lie. There is some kind of a connection because a person that is a tortured soul is a frustrated person. A person that has like some kind of inner demons, or maybe they don't like mankind, or maybe there's things like they love animals and they don't like people, the way people treat animals, or like maybe they have like real serious problems that they're like witness to in these times, and it bothers them and creates a conflict in them, and then they have no way to really express it. Art is like the best way to express things culturally. You can go to church and like witness and give your testimony and say like, oh, this terrible things happened and stuff, and like you have a support network in a church and stuff like that, but you don't, it's not your own pulpit. Like art, you're like a congregation member or something, and you get like a little bit of time to ask for a prayer or something like that. But art is like you're the preacher, you're the pulpit, and so it gives. I think it's a great motivational thing. The dark side. I'm not afraid of it at all. I'm not afraid to face that because a lot of that. I'm inspired a lot of that by a lot of that, and I'm inspired by some desperation. Like someone a long time ago said, desperation was a great inspirer. Feeling desperate and then still continuing down your artistic path is a great inspirer. The self-portraits, I used them for a long time. I would tell people I was growing my feelings. I was using them to grow my feelings because I kind of had some sociopathic tendencies, but a lot of people wouldn't necessarily see it because I can pretend. I see how other people are emotional all the time, and I can imitate it. I'm not a great actor, like a professional type of actor, but I can act like I have feelings really well. And so, but I would use the self-portraits to put my real feelings in there. I called it my true feelings. And I would use the self-portraits every day as a way of purging the negative feelings and allowing myself to have more positive feelings, dealing with stress daily, like a therapy. And so I think it's really helped a lot. I don't know if there was like a magic eureka moment. I don't know if I ever experienced a magical eureka moment where I would say I'm going to be a professional full-time artist. But I know the day I drew the first self-portrait uh, in the series of all of them in my life, I knew this was my life calling because I knew that the possibilities were endless and infinite. And I can do them in under any circumstances. If I have a headache, I do a headache one. If I have insomnia or something, I can do an insomnia one. If I'm totally exhausted, I'll draw till I fall asleep. No matter what the circumstances are, I can do a self-portrait. It's like it's really ingrained in my central nervous system. January 6, 1999. I'd been doing a self-portrait every day since March 30th of 95 and had never missed a day. And after I did this one, I realized there's no way I will ever miss a day. I didn't remember doing it. I had gotten into that argument with that girl in the other book where we were breaking up or something. Well, I got really drunk on some cheap liquor early times, and it was a snowstorm, like a blizzard, and I just remember getting lost and falling down in the snow, and I kept finding my way back to the liquor store. And then I ended up at this girl's house, and she let me in, and then I spent the night there or whatever, and she took me back the next day, and I felt so hungover and just awful. And I thought, oh man, on the ride back, I was like, I did not even do my self-portrait yesterday. Like, oh my God, I missed a day. I can't believe it. And then when I came into the office, I opened up the door, and my book was laid out just like this, and that picture was on the page. And I was like, oh my gosh. And then she said, she was there with me, and she looked at it, and she said, you sounded exactly like that on the phone. You sounded exactly like that. And then that's when I knew, like, because it was like a drunken blackout, and I still did a self-portrait. And then I knew, like, unless I'm in a coma, there's like no, I will never have to worry about missing a day. Oh, I think I was in the process here, starting to break up with this girl. Yeah. Oh, I was crying. This is probably one of 3 pictures total out of like 9,000 where I'm like drew it while I was crying. There's another one I did where my great aunt passed away, and I was crying a little bit, but I don't really cry too terribly much or anything. Whoa, that breakup must have been really troubling. Yeah, here she goes. Doing better. She was a really short girl. I'm not so concerned with like composition and figure ground and all these types of things. I don't think of a drawing when I do the self-portraits. I don't think of them as a I think of them as all as one piece together. I don't think of them as each day as an individual work of art, really at all. Even though I might like one and share it with some people, show some people or something, if it's crappy, I don't care because it's the act that's more important to me than the final product. Uh, I had this real feeling that like filled my whole entire being that no one way of interpreting myself should set the standard for the way I see the world, because like I was taking art history classes and things, and all of these artists like Van Gogh would see the world one way, Cezanne see the world another way, and Paul McCarthy, the performance artist, sees the world another way, and everybody from hundreds of years has been seeing the world in their own unique way. And I thought the truth to me was that everyone is different. And then I thought they really encourage you in school to develop your own style, your own unique way of seeing the world. And they give you these assignments where you try out all these different types of ways of doing things, different media and stuff, so that way you can get like a bigger palette to interpret your expression. But I don't know, something in my physical body was just like, wow. Today is not the same as yesterday. And if I'm happy one day and then I'm sad the next day, why do I have to limit myself, limit my media palette to this one form of expression? But I knew that if I did this every day, it would come out. I knew that subconsciously or even consciously, I would be able to like have a means of expression that was really super rich. Very rarely will I just be an abstract thing. Usually I try to at least represent myself somewhat, but here's me as an island. I made myself an island. We'll skip that one. Let's see. I don't know, these are probably, I don't know why I'm crawling. Something happened. I Oh, I was mad about a sandwich. That's strange. Going back to this one where I was in Ireland, where I said I hardly ever draw myself like abstract, where there's no representation. This writing, it looks like some kind of nonsense, a mudox and vudox, a wudak daku, mujudak, mujudak daku maku. It's like some kind of, sounds like the ramblings or something of a weird person, but really what it is I had read a book by Nietzsche that said, I have a pain and call it dog. And one of the first steps towards controlling pain is to name it. And so what I did was, because you'll probably see later on in some of the other books, like some stomach aches and stuff like this. I was plagued all in my youth with these terrible, terrible stomach aches. Well, after I read that, I named it Daku. And so this is like some weird type of trying to make like a little nursery rhyme or something out of it. But years later, once I started performing, I ended up making an album about the evolution of my interpretation of pain over the years. And so then the album is called Daku. So Daku is the negative side and Maku is the positive side, but I just thought I would share that. A couple thousand of them are just a daily purging of anxiety and stress, like a mental health maintenance. But sometimes I will be happy with myself and do something kind of like that, and like I say, or like it's okay to love yourself or something. This one, I think I was a little bit blue, a little bit depressed. I'd noticed over the years that when I do black and white drawing, it's a depression, but I was thinking about all these colors, like the color of life or something, but it was just a thought, like I didn't have a color in my life. So I forced myself, I forced myself to like put the color in my life. It kind of looks stressful now, but. Yellow and green to me have always been, I see other artists' artworks, and they use like a lot of yellow and green. To me, it's a sign of mental illness, because a yellow, they want some kind of spirituality, and the green, they want some kind of calming thing. But when you put, like they're trying to like express themselves and do something, but they're having some kind of problems. And so a lot of times yellow's spiritual, and then they want to calm, but when you put the yellow and green together, it's like really electrifying, and it shows their mania, and they're not really aware of it. Got this, probably my heart's cut out or something. That girl cheated on me. So I did a yellow and green one on purpose. So I must have been thinking I was having some type of little bit of mental problem. I had a spontaneous pneumothorax. My right lung just popped. That's my pain from the hospital, and I did this one in the emergency room. Here's me in the hospital, and you can't really see it, but they had like a monitor, like a something. That's an IV bag, I guess, but they had like a chest tube and everything. It was pretty crazy, but it's happened before. Oh yeah, here's the chest tube right there, and then I made myself kind of surreal, like part of the equipment. I don't know what kind of medicine they had me on at that time. There's me looking in the mirror. I finally got up and was able to like walk around a little bit, and then look in the mirror. And then there's the chest tube going in there. It was real painful. There's the scab, the scar, not the scab, but I was drawing like the open wound that I had. They don't seal it up whenever you have a open chest wound. It has to heal from the inside out. They can't just like stitch it up, and so like that's the what it looked like in the mirror. Then I got some kind of chest infection. Here's me as some kind of crazy little voodoo, trying to make that chest wound pain thing into some kind of like make it like a talisman or something, or some kind of a magical thing. And then this is after Picasso's Women of Avignon, and my open wound is an eye and a mouth and a vagina for the ego, the superego, and the id. And I just put myself in the same poses as the women from that very famous painting. And then it almost sealed up completely, and I'm sitting in this building, one floor down. I lived in a different apartment. Some guy gave me some religious picture. I don't have it anymore. Oh, then I started riding my bike. Got a bike. That was the day I got my brand new bike helmet. And the doctors, they said, "What can you do?" They said, "What can't you do?" On the follow-up for my pneumothorax. And I was like, "What do you mean, what can't I do? I can do everything. I've got a bike and everything." And they were like, "Really?" And they were expecting me like to not even be able to go up and down stairs and stuff, but it's happened so many times. I've had a pneumothorax. If I get too stressed out, one of my lungs will just pop, and like, I'm real used to it.
I get a pain in my chest when he's not in his nest. I can't walk when he's hungry. I can't sleep when he's lonely. I often try to talk to the Daku, but he doesn't listen very well either. He's unruly, and I think Daku is deaf. If I stabbed him, I'd be certain of relief. Daku hates to be petted, so I poke at him. He's outgrowing his tank. Daku can also eat in 2 different places at the same time. He's right here, just begging me to stab him, gut myself, pull him out and stomp on the Daku. Daku's no friend. Daku is killing me. Killing me. Killing me.
One time when I was 19, I had a major depression, and I stayed in a room. I was living with my girlfriend at the time, and I stayed in a room for like 6 months straight, hardly ever left the room but to use the bathroom. I've had times where I've had some types of delusions of grandeur. like a little kid holding a teddy bear. My childhood, I would say, is probably colorful. I had a single mother for a long time. I stayed with my grandparents quite a bit during summers, and I think I drew circles prematurely, like maybe age 1, and then it wasn't but a week or 2 later I started putting eyes in them. When I was 1 and a half, I was potty trained, and I went straight to school after that, and was reading when I was 2 years old, and was in like the gifted and talented programs all through school. I wasn't like really a prodigy or anything because I never got to nurture it, but then as I got a little bit older, I started not being interested in school anymore. It was kind of boring, and I felt like they were holding me back. And I was also a latchkey kid, so I was home alone a whole lot, and I had to wear like this awful red yarn with a key on it, and it would like rub me all day because if I lost my key or something, I'd have no way to get into the house. But my mother showed me how to break into the house with the knife through the kitchen window. When I was 10, I started getting in trouble with the law. If my mother wasn't coming home after work, like all the other kids had to go in at dinner time. I could stay outside forever, but it was dark. I was more scared of the house than I was the dark and stuff, and so then I started, like by the time I was 11 or 12, I started breaking into people's houses after they died, and would like go through their stuff and hang out in these other people's houses, and then it's a strange thing, but I just my mind would wander. Like one lady died across the street. She was elderly, and I broke into her house, and I stayed in there for a couple weeks. Like I wasn't ever missing. I went to school, come home before my mom got home and stuff like that. But like if I found some swords or like something from her travels, I would play with them and like give them to the other kids and stuff like this, or like a steals her TV and stuff, and just to hang out in the people's houses after they died. I would rather play outside or in some dead person's house than in my own house, because for some reason I had like this irrational fear, paranoia of the bad people. And I had really no concept of what they were. I just had like this vague idea that the bad people were killers. Anyone who ever got killed was killed by these mysterious bad people. And like one lady down the street, Olga, she got murdered, and they played the 911 tape on TV or something like that, and her husband had escaped from he got furloughed or something from a mental hospital, and like stabbed her all up, and every time he stabbed her, he was screaming her name, like Olga. He was going, Olga, 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 like that. And then she was like screaming to death. She screamed until she died. And like that really haunted me. Like that type of thing really scared me. And so I was just always afraid, like, of these bad people. I just always thought they were, like, somewhere around. And I had, like, this whole ritual before I went to sleep at night. I would pretend like I was dead already, so that if the bad people, if they, like, found me or something and tried to kill me, like, they would see, like, oh, I was already dead. And I would have, like, this, like, elaborate, like, setup, like a funeral or something. And I would sleep next to the open window in the summertime. I was picked on a lot by the older kids because they could stay out longer. So if I, like, some of these older high school kids, they would, like, try to beat me up or something. And then I would take it out on the I would just pass the beating down the line and stuff like that. And I would only have one friend at a time. They would be my best friend, inseparable, and then I would eventually beat them up and then look for a new friend, and then be their friend for a while and beat them up. And then after a while, nobody was allowed to play with me. Probably by the time I was about 13, I'd say. I use art a lot of times, at least in the beginning, a whole lot. Maybe not so much with the self-portraits, but with the performances, to purge myself of the trauma. Traumatic events, I would relay them like an exorcism or something. Just let it all out, all of these terrible things. And so, but like my mother, she has no idea all these crazy things that went on. She might remember a few incidents or something with me with the police, but she had no idea the types of things I was a witness to or subjected to, or I don't know, because when you're a boy, you're supposed to like suck it up. You don't really tell your mother like, oh, Officer Don Amos, the one you think is supposed to be helping people is like molesting all the troubled kids. You don't, you know, if you got a single mom and you're a boy, you just gotta suck it up, really, so. I think this is around the time I was graduating. I graduated from ETSU in the summer of '98, so there'll probably be like some pictures in there about that. The dorm was like a prison with the cinder block walls, and I just had like these scribbles on this old palette or something, and it's like some tensions are flying off, and it's a self-constructed wall. It looks like I'm trying to build in my brain, but I really felt comfortable in the college, in the dormitory. I stayed in the dormitory 5 years, every semester, even summer school, because it was just convenient and stuff, and I didn't mind it. I've been in prison one time, a long time ago, and I got used to it, so. There's some anxiety. That's nuts. I was under a whole lot of stress going to college. It was really hard for me to do assignments, and they called the ACLU on me one time because I sewed my mouth shut for this photography student. They had the lawyers come, and they had like this big meeting and everything, and they had more than one meeting on me, but this one was the big one. And then I had to jump through a lot of hoops and stuff in order to graduate. And like, even if my faculty, my teachers, advisors and stuff would say like, oh, we recommend at the evaluation you skip 2 or 3 years worth of stuff and just take 5,000 level advanced classes, elective, stuff like that. The chairman is no. He has to jump. If he wants to graduate, he has to jump through every hoop. He has to do everything just like everybody else. He does not get special treatment and stuff. So that guy really held me back big time. And I didn't like to do assignments. they would have me make a painting or something. They say, like in the syllabus, it would say, make a drawing. I think one of them said was, make a drawing that weighed 5 pounds. And I told the teacher, like, I mean, this stuff really stressed me out, kept me up at night all night, and I would think, like, how am I going to, like, approach this and not get fly off the handle and get upset? But I would say, if I make any drawing that weighs 5 pounds, it's automatically garbage. It doesn't have anything to do with me. I have my life purpose. I'm gonna draw myself every day for the rest of my life. If I make a drawing that weighs 5 pounds, I don't want it. I mean, that's silliness. And but they would say, like, you have to do this, you have to do that. And so I would never do it. I would never do it. That's the last day of classes. Last class, last exam, last hoop, last jump. I look kind of blue, like kind of down, but I was probably really relieved to get out of there. This is funny. Here's me in a diaper with a ski mask on, and I don't know why, but at the time, still to me, it speaks to me something about being a baby and in a violent, like a ski mask or something. And I made this nail-studded paddle for a sculpture, intro to sculpture class. And on one side of the paddle, I don't know if you can really tell, I painted like welts and flesh colored and welts. So it looked like you saw the nails and it was like a before and after, but the teacher did not want me to come back into class because she thought I was gonna like spank myself with it. But my girlfriend at the time took all these Polaroids of me with the ski mask and the diaper, and I would just scribble red pen on it and make it look like some kind of abuse, like a spank yourself or something. And I would leave these, I still have quite a few of them left, like probably 20 or so, and I will leave them in people's places, like in their car, at different stuff, and then it's kind of like a funny thing to do. People find it and then they feel like really flipped out. One time I left one under, and I was house sitting, and they had a big tub of sour cream in the refrigerator, and I left a Polaroid of me in the ski mask and the diaper like under it. Well, apparently that sour cream had gone totally sour, and they never moved it until they moved out of the apartment. So like a year later or something, when they moved out, they were cleaning out the refrigerator and they found it, and they thought, oh my gosh, we've been violated. Like some psychopath freak has come in here and took pictures of the ski mask and a diaper. But then they saw the tattoos and they realized it was me. And I just think that's funny sometimes. I still do it, but you never know what happens if the people meant to find them will find them. That's just a regular, probably some anxiety. Then, my best friend Don Morgan shot himself in the head. Don, he had some mental problems, and he had gone to like some kind of inpatient treatment for like a couple of days. And his girlfriend had me go over and try to clean up the blood stain before his parents came from Chattanooga. And like the more I was like scrubbing it, like the bigger the puddle kept getting, until finally I just left it. Like, I don't know how you clean up that stuff, but he was in the ICU, and I was like wanting to trade places with him and stuff. And then I had to like call his family, and I was like a robot or something. And then I had to go to get to the free mental health and tell him like, oh my gosh, my best friend like shot himself in the head or something. Here's me crying again. But it looks more like I was trying to force myself to cry. I don't think I was really crying too much. Actually, that looks like a real teardrop. This is probably a watercolor chalk. There's some tears on there. So I guess, yeah, I was probably really crying, but it's not too many times I do that. Hey.
Okay.
Morning.
Kitchen.
Kitchen. To the left is the closet. People tell me that I'm like some frightening and some scary and well now because of the drug things online, the people say like I'm an attention whore or like I'm a liar, like I make these things up to get attention or because I want publicity. There's the bathroom. You won't need to use it.
Okay.
And this is a cool shot right there. So I do a lot of painting in the bathtub to relax.
Okay.
So those colored crayons,
Oh, yeah.
watercolor crayons in the corner is real nice.
Cool.
Okay. They say I'm doing like some gimmicks to make money or something, but I think, oh my gosh, like they're like in fantasy land, because if I had some money, I would not be living in this type of place. I would not be living in squalor. So that's how a lot of people see me. Okay, then here are my releases, like basically my merchandise, like stock.
Mm-hmm.
That's my stock, inventory stock.
Mm-hmm.
And then these are like the ones I haven't released yet that are still being developed, but they're still products.
Yeah.
I was having this really strange experience where I was waking up with seizures, and I was like having a fit, and like the world would be too bright. My fists would be all clenched up, and I'd be like shaking like this, and I would have this feeling that I was being born physically for the first time ever. And then these are like documents of projects past.
Yeah.
No, not these two, but
Oh, okay,
not
yeah,
this,
yeah.
but these boxes
Yeah.
and these things here. And like after the first couple of mornings waking up like this with the seizure fit and everything, and being born for the first time, was like really scary. And then the third morning I wake up, I'm like twisted around with the blanket all wrapped up around me, and I'm thinking I'm a breech birth, like the umbilical cord or something's wrapped up around my neck, and I'm choking and I'm dying, I'm being born and the world's too bright and I'm shaking. And then I said to Nicole, I said, oh my gosh, what if I'm a C-section? Then this is like art supplies,
Yeah.
and then media, and then these are the photographs that I find in the trash constantly. Then the next morning after that, and having a wonderful, peaceful sleep, I wake up, I'm having the seizure, I'm thinking I'm being born again for the first time. Physically, it's like, I called it like a near-birth experience or something, and there's cop walkie-talkies just going off over my head, like, come on, 24, all this stuff. Then this little closet's closed closet.
Yeah.
And I can barely walk. I'm like practically crawling and using the walls with my shoulder to get to my front door. And I look through the peephole, and there's cops here and cops here, and my neighbor across the hall's door is wide open, and there's a dead lady laying in the middle of the kitchen floor. And so I went from a near-birth experience to an instant like tunnel vision of death. These are DVDs, art DVDs that I used to really love but don't have time to watch anymore. That's the only time I've ever really contemplated moving out of here. I thought it's getting too close, and then I opened up the door and looked, and then they like picked her up in a sheet like she was on the streets of Syria, and they just like slung her onto the gurney thing like right in front of my door. And then the next morning I woke up, and I didn't have the seizure. Pushed the button for the elevator door. The door opens up, and there's a dead body on there with the cops. And the cops like, you can't get in, you can't come on this one. And I was like, oh my God, it's like closing in. And like these people next door to me used to party all the time, and they hadn't been partying and stuff. And I was like, oh my God, if this guy's dead, I'm out of here, because it's just coming too close to me. The last closet is like the potluck closet, and it's got like tools, bicycle pump, all my books are like, I don't have a whole lot of books. Even though I don't socialize and interact with these people, like it was just getting to be too much death. And with this near-birth experience seizure craziness, that's the only time I've ever thought about leaving. I love this place so much, no matter what happens, I love it. When I first moved into this building, in like 2000 or something. My original goal was to make a documentary about all of the interesting people that live in this building, from like veterans to elderly people, just all different types of people. And this building is really well known for having a whole lot of like interesting characters. And so I was gonna do a documentary, but then I never felt comfortable, and like most people don't even leave their apartment and they're all on drugs and stuff like this. And some of them are so messed up on like psych meds or something that the case manager once told me that if she could get them out of their chair, like recliner, lounge chair, whatever, 3 times a day, that was a good day for them. And so like it was really boring and stuff. Like I never did a documentary well. I started a new sketchbook, and this is what I wrote. Theme: pill, medicine, and drug experiment. Every single person in my apartment building takes pills and/or drugs. I live in a big building. They say someone can get every kind of pill there is in my apartment. See, the experiment is to take every single kind and draw myself under the influence of every drug and every pill and note the changes. That was my big delusion of grandeur. I could take all these pills. And so the first day I got a hold of something called butalbitals. They were pain pills. I took 4 of them. Then the next day I took Valium. Then I took a break from the pills and I drank all these liquor drinks. And I was sitting at the bar drawing myself. It was looking pretty good, but then it got to where I had to get someone to make a map of how I could get back home. And I was just scribbling and stuff. I was all messed up on liquor. This one I took some Percocets. This is Lortabs. It made my nose really itchy. Didn't do too much else to me, just made my nose itch. And this one is huffing nitrous oxide, laughing gas. And then this one is Xanax. This one was my favorite of all. It made me feel most earthy and peaceful. Then this one, someone came. All these pills were things people just gave to me because they heard about my project, and every time someone would give me something, they would tell someone about it. And so people were just knocking on my door left and right and saying, when I was a kid, we used to do this, or here's this. And this girl cleaned out her medicine cabinet, and she gave me 1 milligram Xanax, 1.5 Roxasets, 1 Vicodin, and a totem pole, and I just took them all. Like originally I was gonna do 1 a day, but then by the time I think I got to about, took the day off. This one says I took a day off and did nothing but Percocet. So I think I was already doing like more than 1 a day. But I'd wait until it wore off and I felt normal, and then I would do another one. But then by this day, I was taking more than 1 thing at a time. It was getting to be quite a bit. And then I did mushrooms, the psychedelic mushrooms. And right as it started kicking in, like my eyes started getting bigger and colors, and then it's weird, like all these pixels just started like radiating and flying out of my face. And then by the time it got to here, I couldn't even draw anymore. So it was like, it ended. I mean, the drawing ended at a good point. I got like a lot of details and stuff done. This one, after that, the next day I went to a psychiatrist and I said, here's my pictures on all these different drugs. I'm doing this experiment. Nobody had given me anything else after the mushrooms. And I said, I just want a prescription for 1 pill of every type of thing I haven't done yet. And what he did instead was he thought I was psychotic, and so for taking all these different pills, so he gave me a prescription for 100 Seroquel pills, which are a heavy tranquilizer, and it was the worst experience of my life. The worst drug I've ever ingested was a Seroquel tranquilizer pill. you could see I was having to fight it the whole time, like just like to be just a draw. I started off doing the proportions and getting the ears and the cheeks and eyes and everything right, and then all of a sudden something inside me, like an inner voice, said, "Don't look at the mirror." So then I just like kept drawing in the book, and then something, the same voice said, "Don't look at your book." And then I thought, oh my gosh, I may need to lay down. And I looked over at my bed, and it said, "Don't look at your bed," like that. And I was just stuck. Like it was trying, the medicine was trying to cut my brain off from my body. Like it really affects your, probably your nervous system or something. And I had to like physically like force myself to keep drawing through the worst feeling ever. And it was then that I realized that when they shoot a lion with a tranquilizer dart, or like if a bear gets trapped in a tree or something and they need to, like they shoot it with a tranquilizer dart, it always looks to me like it's drunk, like in La La Land, but it's not. It's in real life, that lion still wants to chew the throats out of all those people. It just can't move. That like inner voice is saying, you don't rip their throats out like that. And so it's scary, one of the most terrifying things I've ever experienced. Then this is Ambien. And I kept getting lower and lower to the floor, to where like by the time I got to my body, my arm was not even attached, like in the same place. Then Buspar, I snorted some, I crushed it up and snorted it because they said it would act faster that way. Then I drank a bunch of cough syrup. And my friend, when she saw this, she said, "You're giving yourself Down syndrome." But I'd already knew that kind of like subconsciously, because I found this Korean book in the trash and found a picture of a girl with Down syndrome and put it on there. And like I was drunk, like almost hallucinating on cough syrup. And I went to this Chinese restaurant up the street to ask what this meant, because I knew there was the lady at the, when you walk in, the greeter was Korean. So I was trying to find out what it meant, and she wrote something, and then it said, "A very beautiful woman." And then, so here's me in some Korean. It's very strange. Then this is huffing lighter fluids. Some old man knocked on my door and he said, "When I was a kid, we used to huff lighter fluid." And he just like stuffed his hand and gave me this lighter fluid and said, "Put it on a sock and stick it in a brown bag and just breathe that stuff. You'll get real messed up." And then I did it. But I really liked the fact that I subconsciously picked this metallic crayons, because it really shows like the fumes. Like I really, when I look at it, it's like I can still smell it and see like the fumes and the blurry out, like that metal smell or something. Then this one was Ritalin. It didn't really do too much to me, really. Like in the other books, you've seen pictures that are more wild. Then this one, I made PCP. My face, you can see it's like coming off in sections. And then this is some vomit, not in real life. This is drawing painted, but I vomited, and I'd eaten a sandwich earlier that day that had some tomato in it. And then did the PCP and everything, and then someone knocked on my door and said, "Oh, I heard you was on the Appalachian Trail, and you got a lot of pictures and stuff." And so like I invited them all in, and I was like sitting around telling like 40 different people that, showing them the Appalachian Trail book. And then something told me, "Brian, these people aren't real." And then I was like, whoa, this is messed up. And then there'd be a knock at the door, and they say, "Oh, hi, Brian, I heard you're on the Appalachian Trail." And I'd let them all in, 20, 30 people. And then after like a half hour or something, showing them all that book and telling them all these crazy stories, "Brian, these people aren't real." And I would like totally freak out. And then after I realized like the third or fourth time that this kept happening, I went and vomited, and all this red stuff was coming out of my nose, and I thought, oh my God, my brain is falling out of my nose. But it wasn't. It was that tomato that was in that sandwich. But I was on PCP, and I thought my brain was falling out. And then that's when I quit. I've done others since then, but that's when that little experiment ended. Like, I couldn't keep going on like that. It was crazy. When I was living with my aunt, my second cousin, which was a small child, and her mother, and my grandmother, and my great aunt, there was a lot of chaos, and I stayed in I was living in a trailer in Central Virginia, and a lot of arguing and typical family type of drama, but it was somewhat stressful because the child was involved, and my great aunt, she was in the last stages of Alzheimer's and couldn't remember anything past 18 seconds, and so she was constantly repeating the same questions, and my grandmother had a couple strokes, and there was just all of this stress around me. And so I thought, well, I'd like to go to China. I thought if I went to China and I heard all of these people talking in Chinese and everything, I wouldn't mind. Like I could live with that. And so then I thought, well, if I go to China, I've heard so much stuff like things like, oh, they drown their girl babies, and there's just so much outrageous things. All my life, like from elementary school on, I've heard all these outrageous things, and I thought, well, if I go there, I better learn Chinese first, in case the people start yelling at me, I'll know what they're saying. And so for 6 hours a day, every day, 7 days a week, for like 9 months straight, I taught myself Mandarin Chinese. While I was doing this, I would go every now and then to the Chinese restaurant in town and like a practice or something, say some things. And then there was a waiter I befriended, and he would come over once a week and I would teach him English. We didn't really do too much. I did the Chinese all on my own, but I really tried to help him learn English. And but somewhere along that line, I thought to myself, well, if I learn Mandarin Chinese and I know it really well, I go to some part in some city in China where there's no foreigners at all, no tourism, no white people. I'm the only white person there, and I tell jokes in Chinese and do stand-up comedy. I thought, well, I could become a famous comedian instantly because they have so many millions of people. And so then I thought, well, if I do stand-up comedy in China, within like 9 months or something, I'll have my own like sitcom and stuff, like a Seinfeld or something. And then I thought, well, you know, right after that, I'll be doing blockbuster movies. I'll become a superstar, a Chinese superstar. And I really believe that this could be a real possibility. And so then I did a Chinese wedding in New York after like about 9 months of teaching myself Mandarin. I performed I wrote a routine and everything, and I performed my stand-up comedy at a Chinese wedding. And it was a big hit, and I thought, well, this is a real possibility. I'm doing it. I'm going to China. I'm going to become a famous stand-up comedian, and within a year or a little over a year, I'll be a Chinese superstar. And then I get to China, and after like a couple days, I met a guy on the street that had lived in the United States for quite a while. And he spoke English, and he said, I said to him, I said, where is the stand-up comedy? I want to be a stand-up comedian. And he said, we don't have that here. And I was like, oh my gosh, like all my dreams were completely shattered. And then when I found myself back in the United States, I thought, I cannot be a stand-up comedian. There's thousands and thousands of stand-up comedians. Everyone wants to be a stand-up comedian and stuff, and there's just so much luck involved in all this other type of business trying to do that. I said, and then I'm here. I'm back in this nasty place where I was a long time ago. And I was like, hell with it. I'm gonna start stand-up tragedy. And instead of making strangers laugh in public, I'm gonna make them cry. Like, I started doing it at this coffee shop. I was nervous, like stage fright. So I read other people's poetry or some writings, but I read it like my own way. Because see, I'd been doing the self-portraits the whole time. For over 10 years, it was of putting all of my feelings into a little 8 by 11 page, 8.5 by 11.5 inch sketchbook page. And so like I was constantly like putting all my feelings into this like confining little place. And so then when I started to like decide, okay, I'm gonna do this other stuff, it was like an explosion of emotion to just let I was bottled up into such a little tiny place, surface area. So then when I started reading the other people's poetry, I just went off. I just like read it like I wanted to, like as aggressive as I wanted or as deranged sounding as whatever I wanted. I just did it like a really, really outrageously. And then I started writing my own stuff. I was like, well, I read these other people's things. I did it like twice or something, reading other people's stuff, and then I wrote one thing or two things, and then I went and did it again like the next week that way with my own stuff, and it had even more emotion. And then one of the kind of side goals in my mind was to make psychopaths or sociopaths or something have feelings. I've been concerned with this quite a bit. And so, you know, I tried to use the videos, the microphone.
My name is Brian Lewis Saunders. I'm 16 and I'm allergic to popcorn.
And sounds, experimental music and stuff to evoke as much feeling in the people as possible. And I was hoping I could do it like so intense that like even a psychopath would have feelings and be upset. I was a little bit delusional because no matter what the people, the psychopaths, they will take it the wrong way. You can say anything about some animal torture or something and they will think it's funny. Like it just depends on like who the people are, but the psychopath that's there in the audience, you're not doing nothing for them but entertaining them. They get off on some crazy stuff. So
Daku has many definitions, like love, time, God, or any other word. Its meaning is its use. By this, I simply mean that its definition lies in our daily conversation. So for someone to say, what is God? What is time? Or what is Daku? Creates linguistic superstitions. It creates a mystery where there really isn't one. We know what it is by how we use it. Before I divulge the impact that Daku has had on my life, it is both necessary and vital that I first share with you the origins of Daku. My first experience with the mysterious stomach pain occurred when I was 16. I was at a movie theater with a friend of mine named Craig Wines, eating popcorn in an aisle seat when, wham! I got broadsided by the most excruciating gigabolt of pain comprehensible to man. It doubled me over, and my right arm stiffened and stopped me from falling and rolling all of the way out into the aisle. I could have made a somersault out of it, but you don't show pain in public. After the initial shock, it felt as if the whole left side of my abdomen was being pinched by an industrial-strength metal clothespin that had been heated up and stuck where a drill bit is supposed to go, and then run in reverse, drawing me up tighter and tighter until it stripped around triple-knotted, burning nerve tissue in my gut, and I couldn't move. Emotionally, fear and anger are brother and sister. Stay with me here. My anticipation of more pain equals fear, and my perception of doctors as ignorant equals anger. And when both of these feelings taboo fornicated inside my head, I became the proud father of a bouncing new baby bad blood emotional incest offspring of hatred towards man like none I'd ever known before. I have this little pet. His name is Daku. All of his teeth and claws came in. I no longer eat, I only feed him. He can't be killed unless I die. He is an invisible part of me. Daku is bad mystery. No one, not even doctors with all of their machines, can see him. Machines may make him high, but medicine makes him angry, and we don't want him angry. He digs and claws, kneads and tears, rips and gnaws, and chews tunnels in my gut, always moving forwards. Sometimes I feel like rescuing him by taking a knife and freeing him. Cut Daku out! Sometimes I think he's cancer. Daku says yes, but the doctors say no. I get a pain in my chest when he's not in his nest. I can't walk when he's he's hungry. I can't sleep when he's lonely. I often try to talk to the Daku, but he doesn't listen very well either. He's unruly, and I think Daku is deaf. If I stabbed him, I'd be certain of relief. Daku hates to be petted, so I poke at him. He's outgrowing his tank. Daku can also eat in 2 different places at the same time. He's right here, just begging me to stab him, gut myself, pull him out and stomp on the Daku. Daku's no friend. Daku is killing me. Killing me. Killing me. Killing me. Killing me.
A lot of the time, people, I think, when it comes to me, they just are trying to figure out if what I'm doing is even real or not. And so I don't fault them with it. It's just the times that we live in. But then I consider myself weird. I know I'm weird. And if you isolate yourself, you develop weird ideas.
I wouldn't film me walking through here, though.
Oh, okay.
Let's take these stairs. Because I interact with people socially online and with the phone, I'm not totally alone, and I've got friends that can say like, you're getting a little bit, that's too much, that's too weird, or that might be like, you know, that's not really the politically correct way to go about expressing that, or like, you know, I get like feedback. So I would say that I'm definitely strange. I would definitely say I would think of myself as weird, and some people might think of me as a creepy. But I don't think I'm creepy. I think that people might be creeps themselves and then see something of that creepy nature in them and then be like, oh, that's creepy, because it like maybe affects them or something. But I don't set out to be like, oh, I'm gonna be as creepy as possible or something like that. If I was gonna do that, I would like do. I'd be a real creep. I mean, I would creep people out big time, more than they could handle it or something. But I don't have any desire to do that. But I'm sure some people think that I'm creepy. But I tell stories like this, it doesn't haunt me so much. Like, I don't still fear the bad people. I became one of them. And like, I still have this negative self-image a lot of times, like, oh, I'm a bad person. I became one of the bad people. But people that know me now, and don't know anything about me in this past other than the stuff I say like during performances or in my books or dreams and things. And so they would never think I was a bad person. But I use the art to kind of really to change my life and become a good person. I need to be more accepting that I am a good person, try to be a good person. But I fear that under certain stress or some situations, social situations or something, I can easily revert. I have that ingrained into me, that kind of anger and lack of emotion sometimes, and I have to try to really stay focused, and I isolate myself really so I don't get involved in that. when it comes to the dark side in the arts and the tortured soul, the tortured people are the ones that give a shit. The tortured people are the people that care. And so there's nothing wrong with that. And art is is probably the greatest tool we have right now to deal with it, to deal with all of it. And so I'd say there's a real great link, but like some kids get into art because they don't know what else to do, and so like in the universities they will tell you, well, you don't have to be tortured, you know, you don't have to do this, you can just like images and stuff, but a lot of times I think there's something lacking. I would suggest if someone is not upset, if they want to be an artist, they like art, and they think it's really interesting and stuff, and they're not upset, I'd say find something to get upset about. Go there. And then you can really be inspired and do some great stuff that will provoke other people to use their brains, because there's not even enough people in the Western world really even using their brains anymore. And it gets worse as time goes by. They're doing less thinking, more repeating, more cut and paste and stuff, and so I would recommend to people to get tortured, become a tortured soul. Really, I don't suggest to go out and get drunk and create a bunch more create problems for yourself, but I would just say find out what bothers you and explore it. Find out what upset you, find out what really gets your goat, what really like pisses you off, or what really, you know, and then explore that and like ask yourself, why is that? What is it about me that makes me react this way or feel this way or whatever, and then go there, and they're gonna do some interesting stuff, no matter who they are, whether they're really that tortured or not, you know. You don't have to be like insane and ranting and raving and you know, flopping around and cutting parts of your body off and stuff like that to do great art. You just have to give a shit. You just have to care about something, and not enough people do. So I would just recommend people care.